everybody. Welcome back to Fun Facts with Faith. Buckle up, because today I'm going to tell you about the time that I had one of my fundamental assumptions about human physiology and the structure of our lives shattered. Okay, it's less dramatic than that makes it sound, but it's kind of a weird one. So, in the 1990s, psychiatrist Thomas Ware conducted an experiment in which he exposed a group of people to darkness for 14 hours a day for a month. By the fourth week, their sleep patterns had all regulated into something a little bit unusual. They would go to sleep shortly after the darkness began for about 4 hours. They would wake up for 1 to 2 hours, and then they would go back to sleep for another approximately 4 hours. In 2001, a historian named Roger Eckert, who was at Virginia Tech, published a seminal paper that drew on 16 years of research, which outlined quite extensive historical evidence that people used to sleep in two distinct chunks. He cites over 500 references to segmented sleeping patterns, from diaries to court records to medical literature to literature like Homer's Odyssey and Don Quixote and Charles Dickens, and some anthropological accounts. Most of these references are to a similar pattern as was shown in that experiment. So a first sleep beginning a couple hours after dusk and lasting about 4 hours, a waking period of a couple of hours, and then a second roughly 4-hour sleep. And this waking period was not necessarily lying in bed staring at the ceiling. Some people got up, they went out for a smoke, they visited their neighbors. A lot of people chose quieter pursuits like reading, writing, or praying. And there are a number of prayer manuals from the late 15th century that have special prayers for these hours. Equally often, this period was used for sex. There's a doctor's manual from the 16th century in France, which advises that the best time to conceive is after the first sleep, because you're not exhausted from your day's labors. You are better rested and you will have more enjoyment and, quote, do it better, end quote. References to first and second sleep start to fade away in the late 17th century, starting among the urban upper classes in Northern Europe and then sort of disseminating from there. And by the 1920s, the idea of two separate sleeps is basically gone from public awareness. The exact cause of this shift is not known. Historians who investigate this phenomenon, Eckert included, speculate that it was prompted by improvements in street and domestic lighting, and a surge in coffee houses, which all made the night more accessible for legitimate activity. So prior to the 17th century, the night was associated with criminals, prostitutes, drunks. It was not a period for like respectable people to be doing stuff. And even for the wealthy who could afford candlelight, there was no social value in staying up late. That changed somewhat with the Reformation and the Counter-Reformation. People became sort of accustomed to holding secret services at night during times of persecution, and sort of reclaimed that territory a little bit. And then as street lights and house lights became more common, I think Paris was one of the first European cities to have street lights, and it was in sort of like the 1660s. But as they became more common and more accessible to more people, that trend of staying up at night spread to the social sphere, and the night became fashionable. And then as people were spending more time awake, they no longer had as much time to dedicate to sleep. And then that segmented sleep pattern starts to fade away. Today, most people have adapted well to an 8-hour sleep. But there are a great number of sleep disorders out there. And there has been suggestion in some spheres, mostly historians, evolutionary psychologists, sleep psychologists, that some sleep disorders may have their roots in this shift away from segmented sleep and in the ubiquity of artificial light. One example would be sleep maintenance insomnia, which is where people wake up at night and have trouble going back to sleep. And that is a condition that starts to appear in the literature at the end of the 19th century, which is about the time that accounts of segmented sleep are starting to disappear. So circumstantial evidence, but it's something that's been brought up. Sleep medicine as a field is not necessarily on board this train, but they're not necessarily off board this train. I mean, the truth about sleep and sleep medicine is that it's understudied and it's not very well understood. So there's potential for us to learn a lot about how sleep works, and about what works best for humans in general. I'm not necessarily advocating a return to 14 hours of sleep time a night, although I could see the appeal, actually, of sleeping in a couple chunks and then having some quiet time to read or to work on projects, like my own projects. But I think it would be difficult to institute something like that, or to even to try it on your own in the kind of structured schedule that we have these days. But it's interesting to consider and to think about. And who knows what the future will bring. That's basically been the lesson that I have been learning from the last couple of months. All right, that's it for today. I will see you tomorrow for a fun fact about a very special octopus. Bye.